Good morning, America. Welcome to Taxes Made Easy. Got an interesting show today, and we're going to focus on how to deal with revenue officers and revenue officer collections. So we're going to take a look at some forms and how best to review and protect yourself when dealing with the revenue officer. So this is something I've touched on before, but again, didn't quite go over the forms. And we're going to talk in detail about a case study that we're looking at as well, or different case studies, and how to negotiate and work with revenue officers, especially when you're dealing with collections. So that can be very scary, very intimidating, and this is when you have a revenue officer sign. This is when you can't play with the case anymore, because this is when things can get very nasty. So we have a lot of news, some helpful news from the IRS, and some overall political news as well, not political, but economic news facing us today. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy, and either live or on rebroadcast here on the smartmoneyculture.tv. We've got some interesting news here, and this is actually good and helpful news from the IRS. So as we approach tax deadline Monday, um, there's help out there. So this is the IRS being helpful, believe it or not. And I'm actually going to go share my screen so that you can see this. Um, there are TACS centers, taxpayer assistance centers across the country. And not only are they going to be open on Saturday, April 13th for face-to-face help, they're going to be open Saturday from 9 to 4 p.m. local time. They're usually not open on Saturdays. They will also have extended hours on Tuesday and Thursday. So what can you do at these TAC centers? You can't make payments. You can't file your taxes, but it is an excellent opportunity to get face-to-face help. So not only Saturday, but throughout the week, and they have extended hours on Tuesday and Thursday. So this is, if you can't file a tax return, you can't pay your taxes. What's the point of going to these centers is to answer your more complicated questions and get some advice on how to file your return and deal with these situations. So if you have questions about how the Inflation Reduction Act, newer things, how to, it's something that you can't figure out online, or you just have questions, want to make sure it's done right. These are great places to get your questions answered. They can tell you exactly what to do. They're usually very knowledgeable and helpful. So if you're running into a thorny issue, this is a great resource. So tips: you have to bring government issue photo ID. You have to have your social security number, and bring any IRS letters or notices so they can look at it, see what's going on, and see what issues you're trying to raise. And a copy, I would bring in a physical copy of your tax return in question, or if you filed one, just bring in a copy so they can look at it, see what your questions are, and they can help you out. Appointments aren't necessary for the Saturday, but I would highly recommend it, because they're going to be overwhelmed. It's going to be hard to get through. But here's the key thing: most people don't know about this. So for those of you that have questions, you want to make sure you get your tax returns in, or maybe amend your tax returns by April 15th, or after that. Go in, get some questions answered. Excuse me, get some help. So again, here it talks about the extended time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it goes through some of that. If you have questions about tax bill, audit, they can help with that. And and they have a lot of online options that they can direct you to make payments or get your tax return filed. So you have the VITA program that's still available. You have ARP things. You have free fillable forms. They have for the Department of Defense has a free tax return program. and then IRS Direct File, which is available in 12 states. And then you can always go to irs.gov to get a lot of questions answered. So some really helpful connections here. And we're going to jump to the next tab. And this is actually another dirty dozen. This one, kind of funny, kind of not. The running joke is, it must be true. It was on the internet, right? This takes it a step further and focuses on social media. So you have all kinds of influencers, people trying to get clicks, trying to get information out there. And how do they do it? A lot of times they're as audacious and ridiculous as possible to get clicks, to get likes, to get people to pay a little bit of attention to me. So again, the IRS is seeing this where people are making up tips and tools and ways to avoid taxes, and it can be grossly misleading. So again, it's an easy way for scammers to influence other people. I had one of my adult sons just the other day say, "Look, someone reached out and they needed this information. I started putting it in, and then I thought to ask, hey, my dad's always talking about scams." So we're like, "You didn't send anything to him. You didn't give him any information." He's like, "No, but I was about to." I was like, "I love you, son. You're a smart kid. You're going to college. But hey, we all make mistakes. We all need to learn as we go through this process." So I can share this information with your family members, share it with your youth, any young adults that you might have, or teenagers. Share it with your elderly parents. Get this information out there because it's real out there. It's a very real thing. So again, watch out for bad advice on social media. If you see something, talk to a tax professional first. Don't trust what's on social media. Most websites for established tax professionals will give you good information. But part of this, and you have to know, I mean, it's hard to know what you don't know. So when I look at things and I'm digging up information and what to share with you, there are some sites I go to that have good information. Some of it, sometimes it's Intuit and TurboTax. Sometimes those sites have bad advice. They don't understand. They're not experts in tax debt resolution. They just pump out lots and lots of tax returns. So be careful of what you just find on different sites. Check with the CPA. Go to irs.gov, but even irs.gov does not share all the information because they are not your advocate. They are not there to help people save as much money on taxes, even though it is your legal right as confirmed by the Supreme Court of the United States. So this is I think this is great advice. Social media, not the ideal place for solid tax advice. And they actually go into a couple common things that they're seeing out there. So the IRS is monitoring this. They can't just shut down every stupid thing that's said on the internet, or they'd shut down half the internet, probably. A little bit of sarcasm on my end. But these are just a couple things to be careful. So if you see someone said, "Hey, do this, you can save money doing this." If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If it doesn't smell right, it probably isn't. So fraudulent form 7202, credits for sick leave and family leave for certain self-employed individuals. So a lot of these are fairly complicated, and you have to understand how this is supposed to be done. So if you're going to use any of these forms, consult a CPA or an expert tax preparer before doing any of these. You have to have an employee, and you can't do it as a self-employed individual. That's where most people are getting hit with these. Fraudulent Schedule H, you invent fictional household employees. Whenever you are lying on your tax return, that is called fraud. That's called tax fraud. And they claim a refund based on false sick or family medical leave wages they never paid. Yeah, that's called fraud. That's called lying to the IRS. Never, ever a good idea. Another last one is You'll file Form 8944 for a hardship waiver. Again, people are making wildly inaccurate claims. This form is only for tax professional use only. So if you don't understand these forms, if you're not a tax preparer, these are kind of off the wall forms that are out there. They are for legitimate use if you fit that situation, but it's not for your average individual. So if you intentionally file these forms with false or fraudulent information, again, you're very likely to get audited because you don't see these forms that often. There's civil and criminal penalties possible, like criminal prosecution. You don't want to go there. And the penalty for a frivolous return is $5,000. So whatever you think you're going to say by using incorrect or claiming incorrect information, or you think it's accurate and it's something somebody online said, take it with a grain of salt. Run it by a tax professional. And I'm spending way too much time on this. But again, you could always report and should report fraud. This is how the IRS tries to collect information and get the information back out to the public. So the next one is actually goes right along with this. So we're gonna just jump to the next tab, from tab to tab to tab, and I'm using up too much time here, but this is good information. So they have the direct file pilot program, which I have my issues with. Trusting the IRS to do your returns, like, and I'm not going to get into that. But they made an important update. So people are trying to do this. One of the biggest problems is that their information that they're trying to file doesn't match what the IRS already has on file. So they're trying to make it easier that if you have your information, that the program will automatically grab the information the IRS already has to validate your return. So you don't have to go back and grab your AGI from the previous year if you don't have your tax return. And you should always keep at least a digital copy of your prior, at least 3 priors, but should be 6-year prior returns. That way, if anything happens, an audit comes up, you have your return, you have the documents to go with it. So they're trying to make this easier to people to use the direct file program because so many are getting rejected. So far they have 60,000. They're hoping for a goal of 100,000. It's still a drop in the bucket, but this is still the pilot year, available only in 10 states. So they just made this adjustment. I think it's a helpful adjustment. Will help people get their returns filed. And again, these are the states included: Arizona, California, Florida, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Hampshire, New York, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. And there's a lot of people in those states. So this is all about the direct file program, and all the news so far has all been about getting information, avoiding bad information as we go into tax season. There's one other big article that I want to talk about, and it also has to do with Yellen's visit to China. And I think it's important news to be aware of. And again, it's another CNBC article. They've been coming out with a lot of good information, but we're going to have to touch on that after the break. Welcome back, everybody. So, I've got this final article that I want to share, um, and this is really has to do with uh, sanctions. Again, Yellen just came back from China and is going through and trying to stake out the U.S. position regarding China, regarding Russia's ongoing war with Russia. So, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, the West, Europe, most of Europe, and the United States issued sanctions, embargoes on Russia. And again, this is breaking news from yesterday evening or yesterday afternoon. It's U.S. policy has, and I'm trying to make this political, but it has not been very coherent in that when sanctions were first issued against Russia, they bit at first, they hurt at first, but enough. It wasn't China wasn't part of it, India wasn't part of it, and Russia soon found other partners for their oil, for their gas, for their petroleum products. That was, it really is a huge part of their economy. And so, as we restricted our production of oil, the prices went up globally, and Russia made a killing. So that's why Russia doesn't have a lot of incentive to stop their war in Ukraine, is because they just developed other trading partners. So instead of Russian oil and gas going to Europe that desperately needs it, it's gone to India and China, and they've been more than happy to pick up the trade with Russian oil. Now, I think it's a good move what Yellen is trying to do, but I think it's too little, way too late here. Russia's so invested in their invasion of Ukraine, they're not going to let go. Ukraine is in a very tough spot now just because it's a manpower issue. It's, again, as the war grinds on, Russia has a much bigger population than Ukraine, which is why they gobbled them up before. So they're prepared to sanction Chinese banks, companies, Beijing's leadership, if they aid Russia's military in its invasion of Ukraine. So how do they judge that? It's a red line that they've drawn, and they put out there that if they aid them militarily, if they aid Russia's war machine, then we're going to issue sanctions against China. I think this should have happened from day one. If we would have drawn a hard line on the sand, included Russia or China and India and these global sanctions on Russia, I think Russia would have had to put the brakes on and really seriously reconsider their invasion of Ukraine. But now, how do we judge what's the significant violation, even by financial institutions? And they put in here, anything that involves aiding Russia's military is unacceptable, and we have the ability to sanction it. And we haven't used this tool yet, but we're years into this war. So it goes back and forth. And we want to call out China for unethical trade practices with green energy, basically. But while we need to be tough with China, it talks about Donald Trump issuing the initial round of 2017s. Biden has kept those in place, most of them in place. I don't know if we're being very strategic with our threats of tariffs and sanctions and putting this pressure on China. If we tell them, look, you can't avoid them militarily, help them militarily, but they can help them domestically with all kinds of other aid. They can just ratchet up that kind of aid, and then they can use the same dollars, use that aid once it's in Russia to do something else. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it can definitely affect the economy. It's something to watch for as tensions do continue to increase with China, and whether or not they're going to care about this or just find another workaround. It seems to me that it sounds good, but it might not have actually much. It has a lot of bark, but not actual bite, because it's going to be too easy to just avoid this and label things as non-military. Or they just might say, tough luck, we don't care about you, and do it anyway. So, and that could lead to more instability as China ramps up their economic war with the West. A lot of information there, a lot of good information there. I'm a world history junkie, so I see what's happening in the world, and I think it is important. Having trade wars and increased tariffs across the globe normally isn't good news. Tariffs generally are counterproductive, but they can be useful tools to counter cheating, which China engages in regularly, and it can use to curb the actions of bad actors out there. China and Russia being two of the biggest ones today on the world stage. So I've seen a lot of cases lately, and the notices are going out. Revenue officers are being assigned, and they're working cases. So, like I mentioned earlier, the IRS has ramped up the number of notices. Millions of notices have gone out. And I'm seeing more and more people with deadlines to respond to revenue officers. So, just in the last couple of days, we've had 2 cases with the exact same deadline, April 25th, that they have to respond. They have to respond quickly, and they have a ton of information that they have to respond with. And it's funny that this notice is called a 9297. I've talked about this before, but I just want to kind of get into this. When you have a big case, if it's payroll liability or if it's a large personal case, don't delay. Don't stick your head in the sand. Get on top of it, because when it gets to this point, it can get really nasty. Most of the scary things that the IRS can do to you happen when the revenue officer's on the case. Now, if you're just in collections and you don't have a revenue officer, they can levy your bank accounts. They can issue wage garnishments against you and take your wages. They can hit your 1099 wages as well. But they typically don't do much else except for issue tax liens. They almost never seize property. That's what revenue officers do. If you don't respond, if you don't work with them. So this is where I see a lot of people potentially getting hurt. Businesses closed down, livelihoods ended. So again, it's something scary when you have a large company that you built. Sometimes you're serving the community. It can be a nonprofit. It can be a for-profit corporation. It can be your own personal finances that you've saved up and you've worked on for decades. And when you fall behind on taxes, sometimes it's just an error. Someone wasn't doing it. A box wasn't checked. In one of the cases I talked about, it literally was a box wasn't checked with their tax preparation service, and they stopped filing. For some reason, we don't know how the box became unchecked, and they stopped filing the tax returns. They did all the work, they did all the processing, but they just didn't file any of the returns. The monies weren't paid. So this is why I have emphasized time and time again, you've got to double check. You can't just trust that your tax preparer is doing this. You've got to make sure that it's being handled correctly. So in this case, they got hit with a big mess. You have to make sure that the tax returns are being filed and that the monies are being paid, the regular payments. And in this case, it's payroll, but there's plenty of other, estimated tax payments. It's the same thing. So when a case gets sent to a revenue officer, so you should be following up on it in collections. And we have plenty of cases where we're still waiting for a revenue officer to be assigned. It's taking a long time, and we're just enjoying this, biding our time because that's what the client wants, waiting for someone to be assigned. Now, once someone is assigned, you put in the queue for the revenue officer. It can take 6 months for someone to be assigned. Lately, and I'm talking about in the last month, the IRS has been gearing up. They've been training a lot of people, and I'm seeing newer revenue officers being assigned to cases, revenue officers I've never worked with before, especially locally. I used to know a lot of them, if not most of them. Now there's a bunch of new names coming across the board. Some of the old ones that I know, but they've transferred a lot of people. They've put a lot of people into training, and these new people coming out are being trained to be bulldogs. They're being trained to treat taxpayers as almost like criminals. You made this mistake. You owe the taxes. You should have been paying it. You should have been doing all these things. And they can be very aggressive. I did a TFRP interview the other day where it was, there's no question, the person owed the taxes. And this person, the revenue officer, with their manager, it was their first time doing this. And they started tearing into the taxpayer. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you say that? I said, hold the phone. And I clarified at the beginning, this is just a TFRP interview. And she said, yes, that's right. And so when she went off script, I gave her a little bit of leeway, but then I pulled her back and I said, hold the phone here. Isn't this just a TFRP interview? We're not questioning this. This should be easy. This shouldn't be a grilling of the taxpayer. And then she talked to the revenue officer, her manager, and said, okay. But if you don't know better, you're going to get grilled. They're going to try to get you to say things that can hurt you. And people ask all the time, if I say something, can I correct it with the IRS? Yes. But there's plenty of times where if you say something, that piece of information can cause a lot of trouble, cause them to dig into things they shouldn't. And again, you want to focus on relevant information and keep them focused on resolving the case. So, the 2 cases I dealt with this week, they called in and they had a stack of paperwork. They didn't know what it looked like. They didn't know, and I can't share the actual forms here without possibly revealing some personal information here, but they both of them had received quite a few letters and documents from the IRS, and they didn't know what it meant. So if you're getting a ton of letters from the IRS, what should you do with it? Get some help. Have someone review it. Have someone look at it and check it out instead of just creating a stack of paperwork. Because buried in that stack of paperwork, I was talking to one, and this is a larger case. I asked him, have you received a 9297? They had a tax professional helping them out, but not someone that was a tax attorney or a tax debt resolution professional like me. And they didn't think they had received this notice. The person dug through the paperwork and said, oh, here it is. I said, well, there's probably deadlines. What's the deadline? So I don't know. So I had them scan it, upload it, send it to me. There's deadlines. And there's a list of documents on it. So if you should write this down. It's called Form 9297, Summary of Contact. And this is a very important form. If you receive this, you need to be very aware that this is where the this is where you need to be very leery and aware when you receive this form. Summary of Contact 9297. The other forms that you need to be very leery of is the Notice of Intent to Levy. Again, the IRS has to send 3 before they can garnish you and start in your bank accounts and wages, vendors, everything else, all the other bad stuff that can happen. So the first 2 are just warning shots, notices of intent to levy. Hey, we're getting ready to levy you. Hey, we're getting ready to levy you. They have to be at least 30 days apart. And then the last one comes certified, that you have to sign for it. And why do you have to sign for it? It's for due process. This is the IRS saying, hey, we went through the steps that we're required to. We gave them due process. We showed that, gave them the opportunity to respond, gave them the opportunity to deal with this, and they didn't. Now, here's the crazy thing. These might have been sent years ago, especially on older debt. And if they were sent years ago, they're ready to garnish you at any time. So even though you might have some newer debt where those notices haven't been sent, on the older ones, it's very possible that they've already been sent. So just because you haven't seen it recently doesn't mean it hasn't been sent. So you have to watch out for those final notices of intent to levy. If you're getting the notices, that's warning flag. Hey, you need to deal with this. You need to deal with this. We review tax return tax letters for free, so we can tell you how serious the situation. And sometimes it's nothing. The IRS yearly sends out, anytime there's a balance owed, doesn't matter the status of it, they'll, unless it's expired or settled with an offer in compromise, but any active balances, they'll send out a yearly notice saying, hey, you have a tax balance. If you want to pay, here's how you pay. But again, it scares people. They see it from the IRS. They don't know what this is. We review those all day long. Not a problem. And then we can tell you if you need to be concerned or not. So the summary of contact. What happens if you blow off a final notice of intent to levy or a summary of contact? You don't meet the deadline. That's when the hammer drops. That's when they can go, and I have one that's a medical office, and the IRS can go in and just garnish all of their Medicare payments. That's easy to do because it's through the government. So they can take 100% of those. And when you take a huge portion, or if not most of, the income from a medical office, you're going to shut that business down, and fast. It's not often the IRS has to padlock businesses because they can usually use financial means to create the same thing. Now, is the IRS goal to shut down businesses? No. No, they really don't. I mean, that's not they don't get a chunk in the belt. That's not their goal. But that's where they're heading unless you work with them, unless you deal with them. So they issue the notices, then they start with the levy action. They clear out bank accounts, they clear out, they garnish either your wages if you're self-employed or 1099, or they go after vendors, people that are paying your business. And the horrible part about that is when your vendors, your main business partners, get notices that, hey, they owe the IRS and everything I give them has to go to the IRS. They usually don't pay. Why would they pay you for services when they know all the funds are going to the IRS? So what usually happens is you lose your vendors, you lose your business partners, and then you're high and dry. So again, that's how I've seen most businesses closed. Have I seen the IRS actually padlock businesses? Yes. Again, it was when it was harder for them to levy, business partners. One was a coffee shop, and actually saw them go in and padlock the business. Very ugly. The owner was not listening, was not responding, and that's what happens when you ignore the IRS for too long. So avoid that pain. Engage with the revenue officer, and we're going to walk through how to respond, how to meet those deadlines, and what this actually looks like after the break. So stay tuned. Thank you again for watching live on rebroadcast here at Taxes Made Easy on the smartmoneyculture.tv. Hope this is informative. Hope this saves some businesses. Help some people avoid all the pain and frustration that comes with dealing with revenue officers and with the IRS. I'll talk to you more, but we're coming up on another break. That's some of the what to expect when you sit down with the revenue officer. And again, they come in all shapes and sizes, but again, it's the same format pretty much almost every time. Welcome back, everybody. This is Hubert Johnson with Taxes Made Easy, and I'm going to share a site, and this is from a company I'm not familiar with, but they actually have a good review of Form 9297. So I'm going to go ahead and share their screen and just kind of walk through with you, and this is a good way to share this information without sharing any personal information. So form number 9297, and this actually walks through and the different parts of the form. So again, at the top of the form, it says summary of taxpayer contact. This is an information request by a revenue officer. This is what it looks like. 9297, summary of taxpayer contact. It's just basic information, and then it goes through and has different information. So here, this is the important part. So if you see 9297, you should stop, pay attention to this. If you don't understand what it's talking about, you need to get some help. So this is typically what it will show. It's asking for wage statements, and these are the time periods that it covers. So this is only 1 month. Usually it's much longer than that. Bank statements for 3 to 6 months. In this case, it's only bank statement. It's only 3 months. Lately, they've been asking for 6 months of bank statements. Again, then a lot of it is list of real property, vehicles, list of vehicles, monthly expenses. So this is for an individual. So this is all individual information. A lot of this is already on the form 433A or 433F. So again, all of this is requested on there, virtual currency. This is important because that's the number one thing that you have to establish with every single case. Filing compliance, payment compliance. So delinquent returns are the number one thing you need to get into a revenue officer. And here they list, 5 different returns that need to be filed. They understand it's going to take time. But again, these people are, these taxpayers I was talking to, they're getting these 9297s, and they have short deadlines, the 25th, and we have April 15th is next Monday. So getting tax preparers to jump on and pump out these returns at the last minute, they're already slammed. They're already very busy. So do what you can, provide what you can, and then you have to get the dates extended. So on this one, date required 8/22. If you don't substantially comply by that date, that's when the hammer can drop, and the IRS revenue officer can say, hey, I issued a 9297, they didn't comply, they didn't respond, or substantially respond. So this is where you have to engage. I would contact the revenue officer right away. Don't wait until this date. Don't just show up at the hearing. Contact him beforehand, start giving them documents, provide as much as you can, and then have dates and look, can I get 2 more weeks to get my tax returns prepared, or I'm not going to do it in a month. They just went on vacation after April 15th, which is typical. So you have to talk with them and see how long you can get these dates extended out to, and it has to be reasonable. One of my biggest frustrations is I see people kick these dates out. They always think they can get another 30 days, but during those 30 days, what are they doing? Not enough. Or very little. So again, just wanted to walk through this. It goes step by step, and again, you have to meet those deadlines. Something else that is, and then you can have additional documents. They always ask, hey, pay them out in full by this date, and I'm off the case. Most people can't. So that's why you have to do either complete sign 433A or F, one or the other. And again, you can always find information through the IRS transcripts. Going back 10 years, older than 10 years, you have to go to the Social Security Administration. So then they'll have their contact information. So again, the 9297 has a lot of information, but at the same time, understanding and responding to it is very, very important. And it's important because if you don't respond, that's when they can really hit you hard, hit your business hard. And I have one of our businesses shutting down. That's fine. If your business is closed and you can't afford the payments, you have to communicate that to the revenue officer. You have to give them that information. And then depending on the case, that's just the start of it. There's a lot more to be done. So if you're keeping your business open, then you have to show them that the business can handle any kind of resolution or payment plan, etc. And again, this is a process going back and forth with the revenue officer, making sure he's respecting your rights. And the case doesn't end with the revenue officer. The revenue officer just wants to have some kind of agreement or resolution in place. And there's three main types: installment agreement, hardship status, or an offer in compromise. Now, one thing, and I want to put this caveat out there. Don't try to do an end round around a revenue officer. So if a revenue officer gets assigned, don't just try to file an offer in compromise to get the case out of their hands. They can pull an offer back from the offer unit. I've seen it happen. So you have to communicate with the revenue officer. You have to provide all the documents. You have to do your due diligence with the revenue officer first before you try to go elsewhere. And I have a case, it's a valid offer, we're going to be submitting it through the revenue officer. We will be negotiating a hardship status first, just to set the case up and give the client taxpayer some breathing space, and we do that frequently. But we're going to tell them, hey, we're looking at doing an offer. Just want you to know, if you have any questions or do you want the offer documents submitted through you, they can request that, they can demand that. And part of it is I'll do plenty of things that save my clients thousands and $10,000s of dollars, but I'm not going to hide the ball. In most cases, if you're hiding the ball and you're trying to pull a fast one over the IRS, they've probably seen it before. There's a few times where they haven't seen something that I've done before, but it's rare. And you have to know the rules and regulations as well, if not better than them, to do that. Otherwise, you're going to get burned. So that's why, again, we was talking earlier about the scams. People coming up with this form and that form, and you can file this stuff. The IRS has seen it. They all of these fraudulent scams and the things that are sticking out are getting reported. That information is being collected by the IRS. They're a very inefficient bureaucracy in many ways. But when you're dealing with revenue officers, if they haven't seen it, their supervisor has. And so if you throw them a curveball, they're going to be talking to their supervisor or training officer and expect them to be talking about this with other individuals within their group. So what happens, and this is one of the biggest problems I've seen, if you can't get a hold of your revenue officer, this is a huge issue today. You need to call him or her. You need to send them faxes. You need to have those fax confirmations saved. So that's your proof that you send in the documents to them. And if they're not responding, you can always use the trick of calling one digit number up on the phone number and one down. So if their phone number is 520-300-1234, if you call 1235, 1236, 1237, or 1233, 1232, 1231, you'll usually get a hold of somebody. And the other revenue officers do not like to get bothered by another revenue officer's cases if they're not responding. So that's a great way to get a response back from a revenue officer. But you have to, if they're not responding, get the group line secretary, and the manager's phone number. And you can call ACS and oftentimes get the manager's phone number or the group phone number. And then, so again, every location has a group. So here in Tucson, there's one group. In larger metropolitan areas, you'll have multiple groups that handle different areas of the cities. But having that information is very key to maintaining contact, making sure there's a response. And you might not hear from a revenue officer for a month or two, and sometimes they go on vacation. And typically in their voicemail, they'll have an update. Hey, I left on vacation. I'll be back this date, or I went into training. Someone else is handling the case, or if you have an urgent issue, contact this manager. And when that happens, the other person's usually more overwhelmed because they're handling their caseload, plus what's coming from this other revenue officer. So they're overworked. They don't, like I said, there's been a big brain drain at the IRS, but you have to stay on top of it. You can't say, hey, I reached out. I've reached out a couple times, they haven't responded. You have to stay on top of them because if you don't, then you'll be surprised by some collection action. You'll get hurt. And if you have the proof that you sent the proof, you have the fax confirmation, so you can, I have the dates logged, what I've been calling, you can frequently get that reversed. And now you're showing that you did your due diligence and they didn't respond. And now the onus is on them to fix the issue and fix it fast. Again, don't hesitate to appeal. CAP appeals are very important. If something happens and the revenue officer's out of line or they're not responding, they have to respond to those very quickly. So I think it's 24 to 48 hours. They need a manager needs to get a hold of you and respond to your question. If the revenue officer does something that's not appropriate, they're not responding to you, and then they issue some kind of collection actions. So again, this is half of what we do is we follow up, we stay on top of cases, and we make sure that nothing bad happens while we wait for these revenue officers. And just be sympathetic, understand where they're coming from. They're overworked, they're overwhelmed, and that they're just trying to tick off the boxes so that they can pass it by their manager. And trust me, they can come back and say, well, I need more information, or I need more information on something else. That's just usually they're just doing their job. It can get to the point where if that's what they do every time, now they're not focused, and sometimes they're just being more demanding than they have to be, and that's why you might say, look, you have what I've submitted. We've already done this 3 times. Just some common sense, let's get this done kind of approach. And usually most of them you can work with. I've dealt with very difficult revenue officers. I've dealt with some excellent ones that were very easy to deal with, but all of them started off by breathing some fire. We can do A, B, C, D, and E, coming after your personal assets. We can do all this stuff. But usually, once I have their documents together, once I show that I'm moving the case forward in a positive manner, I get a very positive result, and we get the case out of the revenue officer's hands sooner rather than later. And then we can do abatements. We can do all kinds of other things that are outside of the revenue officer's purview. So my biggest takeaway is if you have a revenue officer assigned to your case, it's probably a bigger case than the average person should handle. If you have questions, don't hesitate to get free advice. Again, our phone number is 520-485-7371. Our website is guardiantaxlaw.com. And like you said, sometimes I go to other websites to get good information. That was a good presentation of the 9297 done by another company. Double check, and review this information with other professionals. Get a second opinion, because this is your livelihood. This affects your family. And that's why when we resolve cases successfully, that's my why. When we help people out, the relief and stress that goes away when they know they're taken care of and they don't have to worry about the IRS or state taxes anymore is huge. States can have a similar thing to revenue officers, where there's an individual assigned directly to the case, but each state is different. So the IRS revenue officer is a little unique in how they operate. But the nice thing is that they're always local to where you are. So if you have someone that's not responding, I've gone down to their offices at times to get a hold of them. You can find out when they're in the office, what days they should be there, and then show up. They don't like you to just show up. But if they're not responding, you can do that. And I've done that where, I've had a face-to-face with someone and actually led to a very productive working relationship, because they saw, they're on top of it. I need to be responsive as well. But don't be afraid of a revenue officer. You just have to engage them and make sure that you're showing positive forward progress in the case, and make sure that your rights are protected. I've had revenue officers slip up and say things that were completely inappropriate. I've filed TIGTA reports, to leave a black mark on their record. I do that very rarely. But there are consequences, and you do have recourses when they don't do their job right. So give us a call, again, if you have any questions. Hubert Johnson here at Guardian Tax Law. We're here to help, and look forward to having another great tax season, getting this taken care of, and getting this stress behind you. So again, that's guardiantaxlaw.com. And thank you for watching here on the smc.tv or smartmoneyculture.tv. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Beautiful weather's coming out. With the eclipse yesterday, things got a little cooler. I hope you were able to enjoy the eclipse from where you are. But again, I'm looking forward to some nice weather, and hopefully the next month it'll be pool weather again. And take care and enjoy your life, enjoy your family, and get the IRS stress out of your life, and also state taxes. You don't need to carry that burden.